"Excuse me, ma'am. I just need to check my account balance, please." Her name was Zara, 9 years old, pink barrettes in her braids, a winter coat 2 sizes too big, shoes held together by hope, and a strip of duct tape on the left sole. She stood at the marble counter of Pinnacle Sovereign Bank, one of the most prestigious financial institutions on the East Coast, and she asked one simple question. The branch manager looked her up and down. Then he laughed. Not a quiet laugh, not a polite, uncomfortable laugh. A loud, ugly, contemptuous laugh that bounced off every marble surface in that lobby and landed on every single person inside it. Within 40 minutes, that same man would be sitting in a chair that used to be his, begging. But first, Zara had to endure every single one of those 40 minutes. Alone. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and we'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. There are children who carry the weight of entire lifetimes before they ever turn 10. Children who know what it feels like to stand in a room full of adults and feel completely invisible. Children who have been taught by loss, by grief, by hard circumstance, to hold themselves together when everything inside them wants to fall apart. Zara Mae Collins was one of those children. She had buried her mother at age 3, too young to remember the funeral, only old enough to feel the permanent absence of something warm that was supposed to always be there. Her father had never been in the picture. Not a mystery, not a complicated story, just a man who made a choice and chose to be nowhere. By the time Zara was 4 years old, she was being raised entirely by her grandmother, Ruth Elaine Collins, in a 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a walk-up building on Decatur Street in a part of the city that never made it into travel guides or magazine features. The apartment had good bones, Ruth always said, good bones and warm light in the afternoon, and a kitchen that smelled like whatever Ruth was cooking, which was always something made from scratch, because Ruth did not believe in shortcuts when it came to feeding people she loved. Ruth Elaine Collins had spent her entire working life in service to other people. So she had trained as a nurse at a time when Black women in her field were regularly passed over for promotions they had more than earned, regularly assigned the hardest patients on the ward, regularly expected to do twice the work for 2/3 of the recognition. She had done it anyway. She had done it with dignity and precision and a quiet fire that her colleagues never fully understood and her patients never forgot. After 20 years at the bedside, she transitioned to teaching. She joined the nursing faculty at Carver Community College, a small institution in the heart of the city that served students who could not afford to go anywhere else. Students who were working 2 jobs while taking classes. Students who had children of their own waiting at home. Students who had been told by somebody somewhere that they were not college material and had decided to prove that person wrong. Ruth taught those students. She taught them clinical skills and patient care, and how to stay calm when everything around you is going wrong. But she also taught them something else, something she never put in a syllabus, something she demonstrated every single day just by showing up and refusing to be diminished. She taught them that dignity was not something you were handed, it was something you carried. You carried it into rooms that didn't want you there. You carried it through conversations that were designed to make you feel small. You carried it when you were tired, when you were grieving, when you were standing at a marble bank counter in worn-out shoes and somebody was laughing at you. You carried it because it was yours and nobody, not a bank manager, not a system, not a lifetime of small cruelties, could take it from you unless you put it down yourself. Ruth never put it down, not once in 73 years. She raised Zara the same way she had lived, carefully, intentionally, with an eye always on the future even when the present was hard. She read to Zara every night without exception. Picture books first, then chapter books, then whatever Zara wanted, which by age 7 was anything she could get her hands on. Ruth took her to the public library every Saturday morning like it was a religious obligation, which in a way it was. She took her to the park and the community garden, and the free museum days and the church choir concerts on Sunday afternoons. She made chocolate chip pancakes on birthdays and banana pudding for no reason at all, except that she felt like it and life was short and sweetness mattered. She told Zara stories about her own childhood, about her mother and her grandmother before her, about the women in their family who had survived things that should have broken them and instead had become more themselves because of it. She told Zara that she came from a long line of women who knew how to carry their dignity, and she told her more than once, sitting in that little kitchen with the afternoon light coming in sideways and the smell of something good on the stove, that one day Zara was going to walk into a bank on Meridian Avenue, and they were going to treat her like she deserved to be treated. Like a young woman with resources and a future and every right to be exactly where she was. That day was supposed to be today. 2 months before Zara's 9th birthday, Ruth Elaine Collins died quietly in her sleep in the same apartment where she had raised her granddaughter. The doctor said it was her heart. The people who knew Ruth said that was probably right, but not in the way the doctor meant. Ruth's heart had simply given everything it had, poured itself out so completely into the people she loved and the students she taught and the small daily acts of care and dignity that defined her entire life, that at some point there was simply nothing left to give. She was 73 years old. She had no regrets. She had, in fact, spent the last several years making very deliberate preparations. Why? Because Ruth Elaine Collins was not a woman who left things to chance. She had a will. She had a small life insurance policy. She had a carefully organized folder of documents in the drawer of her nightstand. And she had account 7741 at Pinnacle Sovereign Bank on Meridian Avenue. A prestige reserve account she had opened 31 years ago with $300 she had saved over 6 months of brown bag lunches, and which she had added to every single month without exception for 3 decades. She had written a letter to go with the account information. She had written it by hand, sitting at the kitchen table on a Tuesday evening, her arthritis making the pen difficult to hold, her handwriting uneven in places, but every word exactly what she meant. She had folded the letter, placed it in a brown envelope, along with the account card and the bank documents, and tucked the envelope inside her Bible on the nightstand, where she knew Zara would eventually find it. Zara found it 11 days after the funeral, when she finally worked up the courage to go through her grandmother's things. She sat on Ruth's bed and held the envelope for a long time before she opened it. Then she read the letter once, very slowly, and then she read it again. And then she held it against her chest the way she had seen her grandmother hold her Bible when something hurt. And she sat there in the quiet apartment that still smelled faintly of Ruth's hand lotion and thought about everything she had been given and everything she had lost and the fact that somehow, even in death, her grandmother had found a way to hold her hand. My sweet Zara Bird, everything I have is yours now. Go to Pinnacle Sovereign on Meridian Avenue. Ask to check account 7741. Show them the card. They will take care of you. I believe in you, baby. I always have. All my love until the stars burn out. Grandma Ruth. Zara read those words 17 times before she left the apartment on the morning of November the 14th. She read them on the bus ride over, her small legs not quite reaching the floor of the seat. She read them while she walked the 4 blocks from the bus stop to the bank, her duct-taped left shoe making a soft, rhythmic flapping sound against the cold sidewalk. She was wearing her good coat, the one Ruth had bought for her last winter, which was already 2 sizes too big because Ruth had bought it that way on purpose. Bought it big so Zara could grow into it, which was exactly the kind of practical, forward-thinking, quietly loving thing Ruth always did. She had her pink barrettes in her braids because Ruth had always said you should look neat when you go somewhere important. She had the brown envelope tucked under her arm. She had Grandpa Joseph's number saved in her phone in case she needed it, though she hoped she wouldn't, because Grandpa Joseph was in an important meeting that morning, and she had been very firm about the fact that she could handle this herself. She was 9 years old. She had buried her grandmother and cried her tears and made her peace and read the letter 17 times. She had practiced what to say in the bathroom mirror. She was ready. She pushed through the heavy glass doors of Pinnacle Sovereign Bank. The lobby was enormous in a way that seemed almost deliberately intimidating. Soaring ceilings, floors of veined white marble that reflected the light from chandeliers that probably cost more than the entire building on Decatur Street where Zara had grown up. The air smelled like leather and wood polish and money. The particular smell of a place that had been designed to make certain people feel like they belonged and certain other people feel like they had wandered in by mistake. Hushed voices, the soft, confident click of expensive heels. Customers in tailored coats waiting at polished counters. Everything quiet and precise and curated, like the inside of a museum, except the exhibits were people, and the art was wealth. Zara walked to the main counter. She smoothed the front of her coat. She lifted her chin. She waited. The teller behind the counter was a woman named Sandra Pruitt, mid-40s, with acrylic nails that tapped against her keyboard with a sharp, impatient sound. She glanced up at Zara, then glanced back down at her screen, then up again, as if confirming what she thought she had seen. She called loudly to her left without looking away from her computer. "Derek, your turn." And then she turned her back and walked to the far end of the counter, where there was suddenly something very important that required her immediate attention. Derek Calloway was the branch manager of Pinnacle Sovereign Bank, Meridian Avenue location. He had been with the bank for 18 years, which he considered the central fact of his professional identity, and which he mentioned when the opportunity arose. Actually, with the frequency and quiet pride of a man who believes that longevity is the same thing as accomplishment. He had a framed photograph on his office wall of himself, shaking hands with the regional CEO at a company awards dinner 3 years ago. He drove a company-leased car, a dark gray sedan that he kept immaculately clean. He wore the same 3 expensive ties on a rotating schedule and had opinions about pocket squares. He had grown up in the suburbs of a mid-sized southern city and had worked his way, through a combination of genuine effort and a complete inability to perceive the structural advantages that had smoothed his path, to the position he now occupied. He believed with the sincere and uncomplicated conviction of a man who had never seriously examined his own assumptions, or that he had earned everything he had entirely through merit. He believed in the bank the way some people believe in institutions, not critically, not thoughtfully, but as a matter of identity, as a reflection of himself and what he valued and who he thought he was. He looked at Zara Mae Collins standing at his counter. He saw a black girl, 9 years old, coat too big, one shoe wrapped in duct tape, a crumpled brown envelope under one small arm, standing in the lobby of Pinnacle Sovereign Bank on a Tuesday morning with the quiet, careful posture of a child who had been raised to hold herself with dignity, even when dignity was the only thing she had. He saw all of that, and then he decided, in the half second between perceiving and responding that determines everything, that what he was looking at was a problem to be removed rather than a person to be served. He laughed. It was not a small sound. It was not the involuntary, quickly suppressed laugh of someone caught off guard. It was a full, deliberate, theatrical laugh, the laugh of a man performing for an audience, and it bounced off the marble floors and the high ceilings and landed on every person in that lobby like something cold and wet. Sandra Pruitt heard it and pressed her lips together in a thin, knowing smile. 2 customers near the deposit slips looked up. A woman in a cashmere turtleneck, waiting for her appointment, tilted her head slightly as if trying to understand the joke. "Can I help you, little girl?" Derek's voice had the syrupy, exaggerated patience of a person speaking to someone they have already decided does not deserve real patience. "Or are you lost? There's a community center about 3 blocks north of here. They might be able to help you with whatever you need." Zara's hands tightened around the brown envelope. She had practiced for this moment, had stood in front of the bathroom mirror and said the words out loud until they came easily, until she could say them without her voice shaking. She said them now. "I'm not lost, sir. I'd like to check my account balance, please." Silence settled over the immediate area around the counter. Derek looked at her. He looked at her shoes. He looked at her coat. He looked at the duct tape on the left sole, and something in his face arranged itself into an expression that was not quite a smile and not quite a sneer, but contained elements of both. Then he looked at the customers nearby, the woman in the cashmere turtleneck, a man in a suit who had paused mid-transaction, a young professional who had just finished making a deposit and had not yet moved away from the counter. And he spread his hands wide in a gesture that was an invitation to share something he found genuinely amusing. "Your account," he said. He leaned both hands flat on the marble counter and looked down at Zara from his full height, which was considerable, and which he was using at that moment the way some people use physical size, not to protect but to diminish. "At Pinnacle Sovereign." He shook his head slowly. "Sweetie, this isn't a lemonade stand bank. We don't do play accounts here. Pinnacle Sovereign serves serious clients with serious assets. You understand what I mean by that? I understand, sir. Zara's voice was level. She had not broken yet. Where's your mother? The question landed fast, designed to find a weak point. She passed away. Zara said it simply. The way you say a thing you have said many times and made your peace with, even when you have not entirely made your peace with it. Sir, I have documentation. Where's your father? He's not here. Derek straightened up, spread his hands wide again, looked at the nearby customers with an expression of theatrical bafflement. You see what I deal with? He said it loud enough to be heard 6 feet in any direction. Every week, he shook his head. Every single week. The woman in the cashmere turtleneck nodded. Slowly, slightly, the nod of a person who has decided that agreement is more comfortable than thought. Zara placed the brown envelope on the counter. Her voice was careful and precise, the voice of a child who had rehearsed and was not going to let go of what she had rehearsed no matter what happened around her. My grandmother opened an account for me, she said. She passed away 2 months ago. She left me the card and the documents. Her name was Ruth Elaine Collins. She was a customer here for 31 years. Derek picked up the envelope with 2 fingers, the way you handle something you are not entirely sure about, and pulled out the card. He looked at it, and in that moment, in the space of perhaps 2 seconds, something happened on his face that was worth paying attention to, though very few people in that lobby were paying close enough attention to catch it. A flicker. Something that looked almost like uncertainty, almost like the first tremor of doubt in a structure that had seemed solid a moment before. The card was matte black, embossed, the lettering precise in gold. Pinnacle Sovereign Prestige Reserve. Account holder, Zara Mae Collins. The Prestige Reserve card was not issued to average clients. It was not issued to checking account holders or standard savings customers. It was issued to exactly one category of person. High net worth clients whose accounts met a very specific and very substantial threshold. Derek knew that. He had been in this bank for 18 years. He knew exactly what that card meant. The flicker lasted 2 seconds. Then it was gone. Because here is the thing about prejudice, about the particular kind of blindness that comes from a lifetime of unexamined assumption. It is extraordinarily good at protecting itself. When the evidence contradicts the assumption does not collapse. It fights back. It finds another explanation. It redirects. Derek Calloway looked at the Prestige Reserve card in his hand, and his brain, which had already decided what Zara was and where she belonged, did not update its conclusion. It found a new conclusion that fit the old framework. It decided the card was stolen. Where did you get this? His voice had changed. The theatrical amusement was gone. What had replaced it was something harder, something that wore the costume of official concern, but was really just the original contempt in a more defensible outfit. My grandmother left it, Zara said. I'm asking where you stole it. The word fell into the lobby like something dropped from a height. Zara felt the blood leave her face. The 2 seconds of silence that followed were the loudest 2 seconds she had ever experienced. She could hear the chandeliers, she could hear the air conditioning. She could hear somewhere behind her the soft click of a security camera repositioning itself. I didn't steal anything, she said. Her voice came out steady. She would think about that later, how it came out steady even then. Derek held the card up. He held it up like evidence, like Exhibit A in a case he had already decided the verdict of, turning it so the nearby customers could see it. A little girl, he said, and his voice was louder now, carrying, performing from wherever it is she came from, walking into Pinnacle Sovereign with a Prestige Reserve card. He looked around the lobby. Does that sound believable to anyone? Nobody answered. Nobody defended her. The woman in the cashmere turtleneck looked at her phone. The man in the suit looked at his watch. The young professional who had not yet moved away from the counter took a small step backward, creating distance between himself and whatever this was. Not one person said a word. Sit over there, Derek said. He pointed to a hard plastic chair in the far corner of the lobby, near the entrance to the restrooms. The worst possible seat in the building. Isolated, peripheral, visible to everyone and connected to no one, The kind of place you put someone when you want them to feel the full weight of their own smallness. Don't touch anything. Don't talk to anyone. I'm calling fraud detection. Zara picked up her envelope from the counter. She walked to the chair. She sat down. The marble floor reflected her shoes, the duct tape on the left sole catching the light from the chandeliers above. She was 9 years old. She had buried her grandmother 2 months ago. She had ridden the bus alone across the city. She had walked 4 blocks in the cold. She had stood at the counter and done everything right, said everything she had practiced, held herself exactly the way Ruth had taught her to hold herself. And she was sitting alone in a plastic chair near a bathroom door while the lobby of Pinnacle Sovereign Bank went back to its business around her as though she did not exist. She opened the brown envelope. She took out the letter. She read it again. My sweet Zara bird, everything I have is yours now. I believe in you, baby. I always have. She believed Ruth. She believed every word. But sitting in that chair, in that lobby, in that cold November morning light, it was the hardest thing she had ever done. 22 minutes passed. Zara watched the lobby. She had nothing else to do, no way to make time move faster. So she watched and she noted and she filed things away with the particular, clear-eyed attention of a child who has learned that paying attention is a form of self-protection. She watched Derek Calloway cross the lobby to greet a couple who had just arrived. A white couple, mid-50s, matching wool coats, the easy confidence of people who have never once in their lives had to wonder whether they belong somewhere. Derek shook the man's hand firmly. He smiled at the woman, but he walked them to a private consultation room with a glass door and wood-paneled walls and 2 leather chairs and a small arrangement of flowers on the table. He brought them coffee. She could see it through the glass door. A tray, 2 cups, little packets of sugar arranged in a small fan. He sat down across from them and leaned forward in the way people lean when they are genuinely engaged, when the conversation is one they want to be having. They had walked in 6 minutes after Zara. They were already being served. She watched Sandra Pruitt at the main counter, transaction after transaction, each one smooth and unhurried. A man in a construction jacket deposited a check. The process took 3 minutes, pleasant, efficient, no questions about where he got the money or whether he was running a con. A woman with a stroller handled a wire transfer. An older gentleman in a cardigan updated his contact information. Nobody waited more than 5 minutes. Nobody was redirected to a plastic chair near the bathroom. Sandra Pruitt's acrylic nails tapped and tapped against her keyboard, and the line moved and the transactions completed, and the lobby hummed with the ordinary, frictionless business of a bank that worked exactly the way it was supposed to work for everybody except Zara. She watched a security guard named Marcus Webb, who stood near the main entrance with the carefully neutral expression of a man who is trying very hard not to have a face. Marcus was a broad-shouldered black man in his late 50s, gray at the temples, with the kind of quiet physical stillness that comes from years of standing in one place and learning to see everything without appearing to look at anything. He had been standing near that entrance when Zara arrived. He had watched Derek laugh. He had watched the whole thing, the card, the accusation, the chair near the bathroom door. He was still watching now, and the expression on his face was not neutral at all, despite his best efforts. It was the expression of a man who recognizes something deeply familiar and wishes he didn't. His hands were clasped in front of him. He did not move. Zara understood, with the particular clarity that children develop when they have no choice but to develop it, that she was being made invisible on purpose, that the chair near the bathroom was not random, that the 22 minutes and counting were not an accident, that every element of what was happening to her, the dismissal, the isolation, the performance of suspicion for the benefit of the other customers, was a system doing exactly what it had been built to do. She understood this the way Ruth had prepared her to understand it, not with bitterness, but with clear eyes and a steady spine. Because you cannot fight something you refuse to see clearly. She pulled out the letter. She read it for the 18th time. Dignity, baby. You carry it. Nobody can take it from you. Nobody. Her phone buzzed on her lap. A text from Grandpa Joseph, still in the meeting, running 20 minutes late. You okay, Zara Bird? She typed back with steady fingers. Yes, Grandpa. I'm fine. She put the phone back in her coat pocket. She sat straight. She kept her chin level. She waited. After 31 minutes, she had been counting, Derek Calloway came back. He did not come to the main counter where normal customers were served, where there were cushioned chairs and the offer of water or coffee and the implicit message that your time and your presence mattered. He came to a small table in the back corner of the lobby, a table that existed for exactly this kind of purpose: the management of problems, the containment of situations, the handling of people who needed to be reminded of where they stood. The table was plain, the chairs were hard. It was positioned so that it was fully visible from the main floor, which meant everyone could see whatever happened there, and fully separated from the main floor, which meant no one would feel obliged to intervene. He sat across from Zara with a yellow legal pad in front of him and a pen that he picked up but did not use. He had the careful, performed professionalism of someone who knows there are security cameras and has adjusted his behavior accordingly. Not enough to treat her with actual respect, but enough to have a plausible record. "Let's try this again," he said. His voice was flat and clinical, the voice of a man who has decided what the outcome of this conversation will be and is going through the motions of process because process provides cover. "You claim this account belongs to you." "It does," Zara said. "You have no legal guardian present. My grandfather's coming. He's in a meeting." "A meeting?" He set the pen down on the legal pad. He had not written anything. "And this grandmother who supposedly left you money, what did she do for a living?" "She was a nurse," Zara said. "Then she taught nursing at Carver Community College for 22 years. A pause. The kind of pause that is a punctuation mark, that is designed to let a statement sit in the air long enough for everyone nearby to absorb the implication within it. "A community college nurse teacher," Derek said slowly, "and left you a prestige reserve account." "She was very careful with money," Zara said. Her voice was flat, not hostile, not pleading, just flat and factual. The voice of someone who has stopped expecting fairness from this conversation and is simply documenting it. "I'm sure she was," Derek said. His smile was the most unpleasant thing Zara had seen in her 9 years of life, and she had attended a funeral 2 months ago. "I've been in banking for 18 years, sweetheart. Careful community college teachers don't end up with prestige reserve accounts. That's just not how it works. You want to tell me what's really going on here?" Sandra Pruitt appeared beside him. She bent down and whispered something in his ear. They both looked at Zara. Sandra straightened up and crossed her arms. "Should I call Child Protective Services?" "Not yet," Derek said. He folded his hands on the table. "I'm freezing the account pending a full fraud investigation. The card is being flagged as potentially stolen property as of this moment." Zara felt something cold move through her chest. "That's my grandmother's money," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it did not break. "She worked her whole life for that money. She saved it for 31 years. You can't just—" "I just did," he said. He stood. He buttoned his jacket. He smoothed his tie with one hand, and then, because some people need an audience for the moments that most reveal who they are, he raised his voice to a level that carried to every corner of the lobby. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this disruption." His voice had the resonant, practiced quality of someone who knows how to project. "This is an attempted account fraud. We take the security of our legitimate clients very seriously at Pinnacle Sovereign Bank, and we will not be manipulated by anyone, regardless of their circumstances." He looked down at Zara. His face was a picture of professional regret, carefully constructed, deeply hollow. "Security, please." Marcus Webb moved toward her. Each step was slow. And the slowness was not deliberate performance. It was the physical manifestation of a man who is doing something his body is resisting. His jaw was set. His hands were down at his sides. He stopped in front of Zara's chair, and he did not look at her face, could not look at her face, and said in a voice that was barely above a murmur, "On your feet, please. I have to walk you out." Zara stood. She was very careful about how she stood. She stood the way Ruth had taught her, spine straight, chin level, the way you stand when you are going to carry your dignity into a room that doesn't want it. She picked up the brown envelope. She pressed it to her chest, the way she had seen Ruth press her Bible. She walked toward the door without rushing, without running, without looking at the floor. Derek's voice followed her across the lobby, still caring, still performing, already composing itself into the official version of the story that he would tell later. Next time you want to run a con, he said, try somewhere with lower standards. This is Pinnacle Sovereign. We have a reputation to protect. A man near the window, golf jacket, boat shoes, the particular ease of a person who has never once had to think about whether a room would welcome him. Slow clapped. Twice. Deliberately. Like applause at a small but satisfying show. Zara pushed through the glass doors. The cold hit her like something physical, something with weight and intent. She walked down the stone steps and sat on the bottom one, her duct-taped shoe making a small sound against the pavement. She did not cry. She took out the letter. She read it. Dignity, baby. You carry it. She read it again. She read it a third time. Her phone rang. Her hands were shaking, which she had not noticed until this moment, shaking in a fine, steady way, and she tried to answer and instead dropped the phone on the stone step. The screen cracked in a diagonal line from the upper left corner. She stared at the crack for a moment. Then she picked it up. Then she sat very still on the cold stone step in her too big coat with her duct-taped shoe and her cracked phone and her grandmother's letter, and she waited because there was nothing else she could do, and waiting was something she was very, very good at. Before we continue, if this story is already moving you, please share it with someone you love. Stories like this one deserve to travel. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do it now so you don't miss what happens next. The parking lot of Pinnacle Sovereign Bank on Meridian Avenue was not the kind of parking lot where you lingered. It was efficient and purposeful. Clean asphalt, clearly marked spaces, a few small trees and concrete planters that were more architectural than organic. People moved through it with the brisk intentionality of people who had places to be and money to manage and no particular reason to slow down. A woman walked past Zara on the steps without breaking stride. She had seen the whole scene through the glass doors, had been inside, had watched Derek perform his authority in front of the lobby, had watched the little girl walk out alone. She adjusted the strap of her handbag and kept walking. A man with a golden retriever jogged by on the sidewalk beyond the parking lot. The dog strained toward Zara, nose working, a tail going. The man tugged the leash, not unkindly, and they moved on. Cars pulled in, cars pulled out. The world conducted its business. Zara sat on the stone step and watched it all with the particular stillness of a child who has learned that the world will do what it will do, and your only real choice is how you hold yourself while it does. She tried calling Grandpa Joseph. The call went straight to voicemail, the warm recorded sound of his voice. You've reached Joseph Collins. Please leave a message and I'll return your call as soon as I'm able. Have a wonderful day. She didn't leave a message. She sent a text instead, typing carefully with fingers that were still slightly unsteady. Uncle Lawrence, they kicked me out. She stopped, deleted that. Grandpa Joseph, she typed. They said I stole Grandma's card. They called me a thief. They froze the account. I'm sitting outside. She stared at the message for a moment, then added, I'm okay. She hit send. She did not know if she was okay, but she knew Ruth would have wanted her to say it, would have wanted her to hold that particular line even if it wasn't entirely true, because sometimes you claim the thing you're reaching for before you fully arrived at it, and the claiming itself helps you get there. She unfolded the letter one more time. The paper was getting soft at the folds from being handled so many times. One corner had a small damp spot from where a tear had fallen and dried. She had not noticed herself cry, but the paper didn't lie. My sweet Zara bird, everything I have is yours now. Go to Pinnacle Sovereign on Meridian Avenue. Ask to check account 7741. Show them the card. They will take care of you. She read that line twice. They will take care of you. She thought about what had happened inside. She thought about the laugh, the plastic chair, the word stolen, the slow clap from the man in the golf jacket. She thought about Marcus Webb's face, that expression she couldn't quite name. And she thought about Sandra Pruitt's whisper, and she thought about the woman in the cashmere turtleneck who had nodded. And she thought about the young professional near the counter who had taken a small step back, and she thought about every single person in that lobby who had seen a 9-year-old child standing alone and had decided that was not their business. Ruth had written, "They will take care of you." And Zara sat on the cold stone step and held the paper in her hands and wondered if her grandmother had known something that the lobby of Pinnacle Sovereign Bank had not yet revealed. Grandma Ruth had known a great many things that the rest of the world was slow to understand. She had been patient about it. She had always been patient about it. Zara decided to be patient too. She tucked the letter back into the envelope. She straightened up on the step. She fixed her posture the way Ruth had always fixed it, with a gentle press of 2 fingers between Zara's shoulder blades. "Sit like you mean it, baby. Sit like you've got somewhere to be and you know it." She sat like she meant it. She sat like she had somewhere to be. She watched the parking lot and waited for whatever was going to happen next. And what happened next was a dark green town car. It turned into the parking lot at a pace that was neither hurried nor casual, the pace of someone who knows exactly where they are going and sees no reason to announce it. It found a parking space with the quiet efficiency of a car that is driven by someone accustomed to arriving at places that matter and wanting the arrival to speak for itself. The door opened. Joseph Earl Collins stepped out. He was 71 years old, and he was the kind of man who made rooms rearrange themselves. Not because he was loud, he was not loud. Not because he demanded attention. He had, decades ago, stopped needing it. He made rooms rearrange themselves the way deep water does, through presence and gravity and the accumulated weight of a life lived with absolute intentionality. He was 6 feet tall with silver hair cut close, and he wore a charcoal overcoat that he had owned for 20 years and had sent to the tailor 6 times because he believed that taking care of things was a form of respect. For the thing, for the craft that made it, for the value of lasting rather than discarding. He had been, for 22 years, the superintendent of the Harrington County School District, the largest district in the state, responsible at his peak for 400 schools and 300,000 students, and a budget that required him to spend every working day of his career arguing for children who could not argue for themselves. He had retired 4 years ago from the district, but he had not retired from anything else. He served as chairman of the Collins Family Education Foundation, which his late wife Ruth had helped him build from a small scholarship fund into a substantial and well-regarded institution. He served as a former board member of Harrington Capital Group, the parent company of Pinnacle Sovereign Bank, a position he had held for 11 years before stepping back to focus on the foundation. He had been in a board meeting with Harrington Capital's current directors that morning when his phone buzzed against the mahogany conference table with a text from Zara. He had read the text once. He had excused himself from the meeting before anyone finished their next sentence. He crossed the parking lot with a deliberate, unhurried stride, and he saw his granddaughter, his late wife's granddaughter, the last living child of his daughter who had died far too young. The little girl who had sat in Ruth's kitchen eating chocolate chip pancakes and being read to every night without exception. Sitting on the cold stone steps of Pinnacle Sovereign Bank in her too big coat with her cracked phone in her lap and her grandmother's letter clutched in her fist. And he sat down beside her on the step without a word and put one arm around her shoulders and held her. He did not speak immediately. He did not ask questions. He did not say everything is going to be fine, or I'm so sorry, or any of the things that adults say when they are trying to manage the distress of children rather than simply be present in it. He sat with her. He let the silence do what silence sometimes needs to do. And Zara, who had been holding herself together with the particular, exhausting discipline of a child determined not to fall apart in public, felt the arm around her shoulders and let go. "Grandpa," she said, and her voice finally broke. Not into sobs, just into the soft, jagged sound of someone releasing something they have been holding too tightly for too long. "They said Grandma was a liar. They called me a thief. They took her card. They froze everything. They made me sit by the bathroom, and then they made me leave, and everyone just watched and nobody—" "I know," Joseph said. His voice was warm and deep and steady as old wood. "I know, Zara Bird. I'm here now." He held her until the shaking stopped. He let her take the time she needed. He did not look at his watch. Then he took from his breast pocket a handkerchief, real cloth, neatly pressed, monogrammed JEC in one corner, and he offered it to her. When she took it and pressed it to her face, she breathed, she settled, she became herself again. When she looked up, Joseph was already on his feet. He extended his hand down to her. "You ready to go back inside?" She looked at the glass doors, at the marble lobby visible through them, at the chandeliers and the counters and the places where all of it had happened. "I don't want to go back in there," she said. "I know," he said. His voice did not soften and it did not harden. It was simply the voice of a man who understood what was being asked and why it was necessary. "But your grandmother spent 31 years walking through those doors. She wanted you to walk out of them with your head high, not sitting on the steps." He kept his hand extended. Zara thought about Ruth. She thought about the letter. She thought about every word of it and what Ruth had meant when she wrote, "Dignity is not given, it is carried." She reached up and took her grandfather's hand. She stood. "Okay," she said. A silver SUV turned into the parking lot. Patricia Weston stepped out. Patricia Weston was the regional president of Pinnacle Sovereign Bank, overseeing 23 branches across 4 states, responsible for a staff of more than 600 people, and a regional portfolio that represented a significant portion of the bank's total institutional value. She was a careful, precise, professionally rigorous woman who had built her career on the principle that a bank's reputation for fairness and trustworthiness was not a soft value but a hard financial asset, and that every departure from that standard was not merely a moral failure, but a liability. She had been on her way to a board lunch when her phone rang. Joseph Collins calling from his personal number. She had listened to what he said for 45 seconds. Then she had told her driver to turn around. She walked across the parking lot with the brisk, contained energy of someone who has already assessed the situation and is moving directly toward resolution. "Joseph," she said. Her hand was extended before she reached him. "I cannot express how deeply sorry I am. This is completely and entirely unacceptable." "My granddaughter," Joseph said, "will accept your apology inside." The 3 of them, Joseph, Patricia, Zara, walked toward the glass doors. Zara's left shoe made its soft flapping sound against the pavement. She held her grandfather's hand. She lifted her chin. She walked through the doors. The lobby stopped. Well, not all at once. It stopped the way lobbies stop when something enters them that reorders the room, a shift in attention that moves from person to person like a current until everyone is facing the same direction. Every head turned. Sandra Pruitt's fingers went still on her keyboard. A customer mid-transaction looked up and forgot to look back down. Marcus Webb, still at his post near the entrance, saw Joseph Collins and felt something happen in his chest that was difficult to name, but had something to do with the particular relief of a reckoning that has been overdue for a very long time. Derek Calloway saw Patricia Weston first. He was in the middle of a conversation near the consultation rooms, and he saw her the moment the doors opened and his face did the thing faces do when the ground shifts under them. A fractional, involuntary change that passed through confusion and disbelief and dawning dread in the space of about 1 second. Regional president, unannounced. He understood immediately that this was not a routine visit, and his mind, moving fast in the particular way minds move when they are calculating risk, began assembling an explanation. Then he saw the man beside Patricia Weston, tall, silver-haired, charcoal overcoat, the particular quality of presence that made the room rearrange itself. And then, and this was the moment that made the explanation impossible, that made every assembled excuse dissolve before it finished forming. He saw the small hand in the large hand, and he recognized the small hand, and the small hand belonged to the little girl he had just accused of fraud and walked out of his lobby. And that little girl was now walking back in, holding hands with someone who was clearly Joseph Earl Collins, whose name Derek knew because Derek had been at this bank for 18 years and knew that Harrington Capital Group was the parent company and that Joseph Collins had served on Harrington Capital's board and that Joseph Collins's late wife had been a customer at this branch for 31 years. Derek Calloway's face went the color of old milk. Patricia's voice was quiet when she reached him. That was its power. It was completely, perfectly, devastatingly quiet. "Derek, conference room, now." But first, and this was Joseph's only request, delivered with the same unraised voice, the same absolute stillness. They stopped at the main counter. "Pull up account 7741, Joseph said. Sandra Pruitt's hands shook as she typed, because she made 2 errors and had to retype. The screen loaded. The lobby held its breath in the way that lobbies hold their breath only once or twice in their institutional lives, during the moments that become the stories people tell later. Account balance, $612,418. $612,000. The number said on the screen in clean black digits, and it said everything that words had failed to say in the previous 40 minutes. It said 31 years of brown bag lunches. It said 14 winters in the same coat. It said buses in the rain and store brand groceries and shoes worn until they could not be worn anymore. And every dollar that did not get spent on Ruth redirected month after month without interruption into this account, into this future, into this child. It said what Ruth had tried to say in her letter and what Zara had tried to say at the counter and what nobody in this lobby had been willing to hear. Derek stared at the number. He stared at it the way people stare at something that reorganizes their understanding of everything that has just happened, and his mouth was open, and no sound was coming out, and the expression on his face moved through shock and disbelief, and the first awful flicker of genuine comprehension. Joseph looked at him. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "She rode the city bus until she was 68 years old," he said. "She bought her winter coat at a consignment store and wore it for 14 years. She made her lunch every day for 20 years, never ate out, never bought herself anything that wasn't strictly necessary, so that she could put an extra $100 a month into this account. She did that for 31 years. He paused. His eyes did not leave Derek's face. "You laughed at my granddaughter's shoes." The lobby was absolutely still. "My wife bought those shoes at a Goodwill store for $3. She did not buy herself new shoes for the last 4 years of her life. She saved that money for Zara's college fund." He let that sit in the air for a moment, let it settle over every person in the lobby, the customers who had watched, the tellers who had enabled, the security guard who had stayed silent, the man who had slow clapped. "You almost took that from this child because of a coat and a pair of shoes." Derek tried to speak. The first attempt produced nothing. The second produced a sound that was not quite words. On the third attempt, he managed, If I had known." "That's the problem, isn't it?" Joseph said, and his voice was still quiet, still even, still carrying to every corner of the lobby the way the truth carries when it has no need to be loud. "If you had known. If she had come in wearing the right things, carrying the right signifiers, looking the way you think wealth is supposed to look." His eyes moved briefly to Zara, standing beside him with her grandmother's letter in her hand, her chin level, her spine straight. "My wife deserved to be treated with basic human dignity the first time she walked through those doors 31 years ago. My granddaughter deserved it today. Neither of them should have required my presence to make that true." Patricia stepped forward. "Derek," she said. "A conference room." He went. In the conference room, Patricia sat in Derek's chair, behind his desk. It was a deliberate choice, and they both knew it. She opened her laptop and turned it so the screen faced him. She pressed play on the security footage. Derek watched himself for 3 minutes and 11 seconds. He watched himself laugh. He watched himself hold up the card like evidence. He watched himself announce to the lobby that this was an attempted fraud. He watched himself point to the chair near the bathroom door. He heard his own voice. "Next time you want to run a con, try somewhere with lower standards." And the sound of it in this room, in this context, with the silence of a regional president sitting across from him, was one of the worst things he had ever experienced. The man in the golf jacket's slow clap was clearly audible on the audio track. Derek's jaw tightened. Patricia closed the laptop. "Violation of the bank's fair service and equal treatment policy," she said. Her voice was precise and unhurried, the voice of someone reading from a document that was already written. "Discriminatory denial of service without legitimate cause. Filing a falsified incident report." She held up a printed page, which states that the minor was disruptive and made threatening statements. The footage shows a 9-year-old girl standing quietly at the counter. Derek opened his mouth. The incident report. I know what the incident report says, Patricia said. I also know what the footage shows. The two are not compatible. She set the page down. Effective immediately, you are suspended without pay. Where your annual performance bonus, which I see here is $38,000, is forfeited in full. A formal HR investigation begins tomorrow morning. Based on this footage and the falsified report, termination for cause is the likely outcome. If that determination is made, it will be noted in your permanent employment record and shared with appropriate regulatory bodies. Derek sat very still. 18 years, he said softly. I've given this bank 18 years. Patricia looked at him without softness and without cruelty. In 18 years, she said, you should have learned that every person who walks through those doors, every person, regardless of what they're wearing or what they look like or where you think they come from, deserves to be treated like a human being. She stood. She opened the conference room door. Ira's security officer was waiting outside. They will assist you in collecting your personal belongings. Your access credentials were revoked 12 minutes ago. Derek Calloway stood. He walked out of his office, through his lobby, past his tellers and his customers and his framed photograph on the wall, the one of himself shaking hands with the regional CEO at the awards dinner for the last time. Sandra Pruitt's reckoning came next, in the same conference room, in the same chair. She was not fired. Patricia was precise about that. You did not start this, but you participated in it. You reinforced it. You whispered in his ear while a child sat alone in a corner. And when you could have said something, you said nothing. And when you could have done something, you called Child Protective Services as a threat. Sandra cried. Hey, she said she knew it was wrong. She said she just didn't want to make trouble. Silence is not neutral, Patricia said. It is a choice. It has consequences. The consequences in Sandra's case were a formal reprimand, mandatory retraining in fair service practices and anti-discrimination policy, and a permanent notation in her personnel file with a zero-tolerance clause for any future incidents. Marcus Webb did not receive a formal disciplinary action. What he received was a conversation. Joseph Collins finding him near the entrance after all the meetings were done, the lobby quiet now, the afternoon light coming in low, and gold through the glass doors. The two men stood together for a moment before Joseph spoke. You saw everything, Joseph said. It was not a question. Marcus looked at the floor, then at the doors, then at Joseph. I've got a daughter in college, and he said, a mortgage, 11 years toward a pension here. Joseph nodded slowly. He understood every one of those things, had spent his career fighting for people who were constrained by exactly these calculations, people who could not afford the cost of conscience in a given moment because the cost was their family's security, their children's futures, the retirement they had worked toward for decades. He understood. He did not excuse. These are real things, Joseph said. I understand them. What will you do next time? Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I'll say something. Whatever it costs. I'll say something. Joseph looked at him steadily, shook his hand. It was not absolution. Absolution was not Joseph's to give. It was a witness to a promise, and a promise, once witnessed, he has a different weight than one made alone. The formal consequences moved quickly after that, the way things move when the right person knows the right people, and the evidence is undeniable. Derek Calloway's termination was finalized within 72 hours. No severance package beyond legal minimums, no letter of recommendation. His name was removed from the awards photograph on the wall, and the photograph was taken down entirely. He applied to 4 other financial institutions over the following months. His name had traveled in the way names travel in industries built on reputation, and none of the 4 institutions moved him past the first round. He eventually found work managing a small currency exchange in a neighborhood several miles from Meridian Avenue, processing transactions for the same population of people he had spent his career treating as problems. Some people said this was ironic. Some said it was fitting. Derek said nothing, at least not publicly. What happened inside him over those months, whether the reckoning produced anything useful, Whether he looked at the faces of the people across his counter and understood something he had refused to understand before, that is a story no one can tell with certainty. It is his to carry. Patricia Weston did not stop at individual accountability. Within 3 months, she had implemented region-wide changes that her team would later describe as the most substantive operational shift in the region's history. Every employee, from branch managers to tellers to security personnel, underwent mandatory training in fair service practices and unconscious bias. Not a one-time module, not a checkbox, but a recurring quarterly commitment with documented outcomes. New customer service protocols required that every inquiry, regardless of the customer's apparent profile, be handled within 15 minutes with full documentation of the reason for any delay. A confidential reporting line was established for customers and staff alike to flag service concerns without fear of retaliation. Mystery shoppers were deployed monthly to all 23 branches. Patricia drafted and posted a small brass plaque at the entrance of every branch in the region. 4 words: every customer deserves respect. It was not a revolution. Patricia was too clear-eyed to call it that. It was a set of structures designed to make the right behavior the path of least resistance, because she had learned over a long career that most people do not choose cruelty so much as they default to it when the systems around them allow it, and the work of change is largely the work of redesigning the systems. She was not naive about what these changes could and could not do. She was committed to doing them anyway. She also made one more call. She called Joseph Collins directly from her personal cell phone on a Sunday afternoon. "I want to do more than discipline bad behavior," she said. "I want to honor your wife's legacy in a way that actually means something. What would that look like?" Joseph was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Let me talk to Zara." Well, the Ruth Elaine Collins Nursing Scholarship was announced 6 weeks after the events at Pinnacle Sovereign. It was funded by Harrington Capital Group as a condition of Joseph Collins's continued engagement with the board. He had been precise about the framing, had insisted it be a condition rather than a gift, because Ruth would have wanted it to be structural rather than charitable, built into the institution rather than dependent on the goodwill of any individual. It was administered by the Collins Family Education Foundation. 2 full scholarships per year, tuition, textbooks, living stipend, awarded to students from underserved communities pursuing nursing or healthcare education. The eligibility criteria were written by Joseph and reviewed by Zara, who was 9 years old and had very specific opinions about what her grandmother would have wanted, all of which were correct. Ruth had been one of those students once, Joseph told the press when the announcement was made. Someone gave her a chance. She spent the rest of her life being that chance for other people. This scholarship is her continuing. The first scholarship ceremony was held the following spring in a small conference room at Carver Community College. Ruth's college, where she had taught for 22 years, where her name was still on the roster in the nursing faculty archives, where her former students occasionally still talked about her in the particular reverential, slightly awed way that people talk about teachers who fundamentally changed how they understood themselves. 2 young women received the inaugural award. Each both cried when they heard the full story. One of them later said, in an interview for the college's alumni newsletter, that she kept a copy of Ruth's letter on her desk during nursing school. The words "dignity is not given, it is carried." She said she read them on the hard days. She said they worked. Zara was in the front row for the ceremony. She was wearing a new coat, sensible, well-made, in a deep navy blue that Ruth would have approved, and new shoes that she had chosen herself from a perfectly ordinary shoe store. Nothing fancy, just solid and practical and the right size. On her bookshelf at home, next to the framed letter in its new glass frame, sat the old shoes with the duct tape sole. She would never throw them away. She had decided that the week after everything happened, he's sitting on her bed in the apartment on Decatur Street that still smelled faintly of Ruth's hand lotion, holding the shoes in both hands and understanding for the first time with her whole self what they represented. Not poverty, not lack, but love expressed through sacrifice. The particular and profound love of a person who gives everything they have to someone else's future. 9 years later, Zara Mae Collins walked across a stage at the Harrington University School of Nursing in cap and gown, first in her graduating class, to receive her nursing degree. Joseph Earl Collins was in the front row. He was on his feet before she reached the stage, which made the people on either side of him laugh quietly and warmly, and he held the monogrammed handkerchief, the same one, laundered and pressed, marker that he had given her on those cold stone steps outside Pinnacle Sovereign Bank, pressed to the corner of his eye. He was 79 now. His hair was fully white. He still wore the charcoal overcoat, newly tailored for the 5th time, because he still believed that taking care of things was a form of respect. He was the same man, just more of himself, which is what time does to people who keep faith with their own character. Zara found him in the crowd after the ceremony. She threw her arms around him in her graduation gown and held on. "She would have been here," Zara said softly, her face against his shoulder. "She is here," Joseph said. His voice was steady but only just. "She has been here every single day." They stood together for a long moment in the noise and celebration of the graduation crowd, holding each other with the particular kind of peace that comes not from the absence of grief, but from living fully inside the love that makes grief possible. Then Zara stepped back and looked at her grandfather. "I'm going to work at Carver Community Hospital," she said, the one in the neighborhood where she grew up. Joseph could not speak. "I want to take care of people the way she took care of people," Zara said. "People who worked hard their whole lives and still get treated like they're invisible." She smoothed the front of her gown, the small, unconscious gesture of a person preparing to say something that matters. "Nobody who comes into my care is going to feel invisible. I promise." Joseph put his hand against her face, the way Ruth used to, the particular gentle gesture that meant, "I see you, and I see everything you are and everything you are becoming, and I am not surprised by any of it. Your grandmother," he said, "would be so proud of you." "I know," Zara said. She smiled. She had Ruth's smile, the full one, the real one, the one that started in the eyes. "I know she would." Ruth Elaine Collins never owned a luxury car. She never took an overseas vacation. She never updated her apartment with new furniture when the old furniture still worked. She never bought a new coat while the old one had warmth left in it. She ate store-brand groceries and rode public transit and wore her shoes until they could not be repaired. And every dollar she did not spend on herself she placed, month after month for 31 years, into an account she had opened with $300 and a clarity of purpose that most people never achieve in a lifetime. She did not do it because she was extraordinary, though she was. She did it because she had decided, early and irreversibly, that her granddaughter's future was worth more than her own comfort. That was the whole equation. That was the entirety of it. The people who saw Zara's shoes and thought they understood the whole story did not understand anything at all. Because dignity is not in what you wear. It is not in what you drive, or where you live, or which lobby you move through with the ease of someone who has never been made to feel unwelcome. Dignity is in how you stand when they are laughing at you. It is in how you hold your grandmother's letter against your chest and refuse to let them see you break. It is in going back through those doors even when everything in you wants to walk away, because someone you love spent 31 years making sure you had somewhere to go back to. Zara Mae Collins walked into Pinnacle Sovereign Bank with duct tape on her shoe and more dignity than anyone in that lobby. She walked out with a future her grandmother had built for her, brick by quiet brick, dollar by careful dollar, year after patient year. She walked out with Ruth's love made real and permanent and structural, woven into scholarships and careers in the lives of nurses who would go on to take care of people who needed taking care of. She walked out carrying what Ruth had always told her to carry. If this story reached something in you, if it reminded you of someone who gave everything so you could have a better chance, if it reminded you of what love looks like when it shows up not in grand gestures but in 31 years of brown bag lunches and carefully saved dollars, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Stories like this one deserve to travel. They deserve to find the people who are sitting on cold stone steps somewhere, holding a letter, waiting for whatever happens next. And if you have ever been that person on the plastic chair, invisible, dismissed, made to feel like you wandered into a room that was not built for you, I want you to hear this clearly. You always belonged. You belong still. Carry your dignity, Nobody can take it from you unless you put it down. Like this video, share it with someone you love. Subscribe to this channel because more stories like this one are coming and you do not want to miss them. Okay, no, we will see you in the next one.